Once upon a time, there was a village near the forest. In the village, there lived a little girl and her mother. The little girl loved the color red and always wore a red hood. So the villagers called her Little Red Riding Hood. One morning, Little Red Riding Hood was called into the kitchen by her mother.
Take this basket of cakes and this pot of butter and go see your sick grandmother. She lives through the woods in a cottage by the brook. On your journey, avoid getting muddy. Never speak to strangers.
Yes, Mother.
Looking very stern, her mother warned.
And above all, never go into the dark woods.
And so, Little Red Riding Hood, together with a basket of cakes and a pot of butter, set off to her grandmother's cottage. On her way there, she met a crossroad. On the left was a path that took her to her grandmother's house. It was long and winding and would take her till the afternoon to get to her grandmother's house. On the right were the dark woods. The dark woods were dull and grey, and no one knew what was within. No one that had ever entered the woods ever came back. There were stories surrounding the dark woods and what it held within. Some say a monster lives within, tall as a tree and white as a house. Some say witches live within, with warts on their noses and malice in their hair. Some say ghosts live within, ghostly and pale-looking and people-eating. Whatever it was, no one knew what the dark woods hid, so no one ever went in. Little Red Riding Hood, however, was not afraid.
No one knows what's in the woods anyway. How do they know there are monsters and witches and ghosts within? It's all scuttlebutt in my way. And if I cut through the forest, I'll be at Grandma's house by midday. It's so much quicker to shortcut through the forest. Yes, this is what I'll do. I'll cut through the forest, even though it's taboo.
And so, Little Red Riding Hood entered the dark woods, unafraid and ready to take on whatever came from within. As she walked through the woods, she thought it wasn't so bad. The sun was shining and the birds were chirping. The streams were bubbling and the flowers were blooming.
See? I knew it was all just poppycock. In this forest, I haven't seen so much as a sock.
She continued walking when she heard a sound behind her. She heard the crunch of a branch, the snap of a twig, the rustle of the leaves, and what sounded very much like footsteps. Was there something behind her? She turned around, but there was nothing. The forest was empty. And so, Little Red Riding Hood continued her way through the dark wood. As she walked through, she thought she heard mutters and whispers behind her. The sun was shadowed by clouds and the birds were silent. The streams were dry and the flowers were browning. Little Red Riding Hood was very much afraid. But Little Red Riding Hood had entered the woods. She was in so deep, she did not know her way out. She tried to remember the way to her grandmother's house by the brook, but all she could see were trees and stones looking the same everywhere she turned. She walked, trying to find her way, and walked until she heard the cracking of branches. She turned around, and behind the tree there was a dark figure.
Hello? Who's there?
Little Red Riding Hood called out to the shadow. She wanted to know who or what it was. It was always less scary when you knew who was behind you. There was a rustle, and the figure behind the tree stepped out. To reveal a wolf with large inquisitive eyes and grey fur.
Who are you? Have you been following me?
The wolf was small, barely the size of Little Red Riding Hood. She was not afraid of such a small creature.
No, I've just been sitting on that rock over there and noticed you've walked past thrice, yet don't seem to be aware. Are you lost? You do look rather lost.
Did I? I'm sorry. I think I'm lost. I'm looking for the brook within these woods.
I know where that is. Would you like me to take you there?
How do I know you're not going to take me somewhere, like that cave over there, and eat me?
Little Red Riding Hood would like not to be lost in this forest, but she would also like to not be eaten.
Eat you?
The wolf wrinkled her nose.
You have too many bones. They'll taste like stones. I know what you humans say about us who live in the forest, but that's all just great nonsense. There's nothing to fear for anyone who ventures here.
But the monsters? The witches? The ghosts?
Monsters? Witches? Ghosts? I don't know which fool got those ideas in your head, but there's nothing here that compares.
So Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf set off through the woods to her grandmother's house. They walked past the trees, past the stones, past the bubbling stream, until they reached the cottage by the brook. Because her mother had raised her with manners, Little Red Riding Hood thanked the wolf for her help. She promised to bring a basket of cakes and a pot of butter for her one day, as thanks for helping her today. And then, Little Red Riding Hood waved the wolf goodbye and went to visit her sick grandmother. And so, Little Red Riding Hood and the wolf became friends. She would go into the forest with a basket of cakes, or biscuits or sweets, and meet the wolf. She would bring her around the forest, showing her the flowers and berries and mushrooms. And just as she had promised, there was no monster, witch, or ghoul. They would also visit her grandmother together, and Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother was never again lonely. And they all lived happily ever after. The end.